Absolutely. Thank you, Pauline. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So thank you all for sticking around. I think we've seen a lot of information already here in the plenary about all of the topics covered in collective agreements, all of the differences across countries. And most of you have also spent some time in breakout rooms taking a closer look at specific countries. And so what we'd really like to do in this panel, ask 3 experts to basically comment on this and tell us a little bit, are you surprised by these findings? Do you think, are we finding a lot of differences? Did you expect those kind of differences? And how do you look at this database? And I would like to start by giving the floor to Isabelle Barth. And she is responsible for collective bargaining and social policy in industrial Europe. Please, Isabelle, go ahead.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. Thank you for organizing a very interesting event. We at Industrial Europe consider bargaining as our core business. I mean, we're representing industrial workers across Europe. And well, to answer your question, I'm not really surprised about these differences. I mean, we know that across Europe, we have very different system. We have different union density, different level of collective bargaining. I mean, some countries you bargain at sectoral level, you bargain at company level in others. But also you have differences in capacity to take industrial action or to fight for good agreement. So, and also the priorities of the trade union are different. But equally important, these differences, they also reflect different political choices on the role of social dialogue and collective bargaining in regulating the economy and the society as a whole. I mean, we don't have any Nordic countries represented, but we know that in these countries, social dialogue and collective bargaining play a central role, thanks to hard-won social battles that took place a long time ago. In Sweden, for instance, you have an obligation to negotiate, but in other countries, like we've heard before, the government do not take any responsibility in supporting collective bargaining, and employers even refuse to sit at the sector level to negotiate. And we know also that in other countries, Romania, for instance, collective bargaining, well-functioning collective bargaining, have been totally dismantled because or due to the intervention of EU institution and Troika. So, I mean, you have actually practice, but also you have some clear political direction that have created the situation where we are, irrespective of the fact that the treaty, actually the European treaty, is clearly aimed at promoting social dialogue in Europe.
Thank you very much for this quick introductory remark. It's absolutely inspiring to hear what you have to say about this, and also what you're saying about Romania just rings home to me very, very much, since I've looked at pay scales in the last couple of months, and looking at Romanian agreements, I have to say I couldn't find wage floors, I couldn't find pay scales, I couldn't find references to minimum wages. It's like these agreements just don't talk about wages at all. Next up, I would like to invite Carlos Catala Piñol from the Comisiones Obreras from Spain to take the floor. He is a member of different European social dialogue groups and a lawyer at Comisiones Obreros. He has to leave in a couple of minutes, so Laurens, if that's okay with you, you'll be third here. Carlos, please go ahead.
Sí, hola, buenas tardes. Bueno, estoy en representación de mi sindicato, la primera organización sindical española, Comisiones Obreras, en concreto yo formo parte del equipo internacional de la Federación de Servicios. Bueno, yo tengo que decir que la intervención que acaba de hacer la señora Isabel Bartés es muy adecuada y yo creo que resume muy bien en muy poco tiempo la cantidad de cosas que se pueden llegar a decir sobre la negociación colectiva en Europa. A mí, yo realmente felicito a los organizadores, a ti, Jana, a Polain y a todos los panelistas de los diferentes países, en mi caso concreto, Dani y Gabriele, por haber sido capaces de sintetizar en solo 1 hora y media cuestiones que son tremendamente complicadas, como muy bien nos acaba de contar Isabel Bartés. En Europa yo creo que hay del orden de 4 o 5 sistemas de relaciones laborales diferentes, como mínimo. Estamos hablando de los sistemas del norte de Europa, estamos hablando de los sistemas del centro de Europa, Alemania o Austria concreto, que a veces no tienen nada que ver con los del norte de Europa. Estamos hablando de los sistemas del sur de Europa, al que también deberíamos añadir en muchas cosas Bélgica, por ejemplo. Estamos hablando de los sistemas del este de Europa y estamos hablando de los sistemas clásicos británicos. Es muy complicado y con los temas sindicales nosotros nos encontramos también, a veces, desgraciadamente, con una falta de unidad, porque en la Confederación Europea de Sindicatos estamos organizadas más de 100 confederaciones europeas diferentes y además 10 federaciones internacionales. Y nosotros incluso como comisiones de servicios estamos presentes en 2 federaciones sindicales diferentes, en UNI por las cuestiones de banca, comercio, juego y sector tecnológico, y también EFAT por todo el tema del turismo. Es decir, imaginémonos la cantidad de situaciones complejas con las que nos podemos encontrar y nos encontramos. Pero yo quisiera hacer sobre todo un llamamiento importante a entender, primero de todo, que los sistemas de negociación colectiva son absolutamente diferentes, pero que para eso tenemos una Unión Europea, una Comisión Europea, y para eso tenemos una Confederación Europea de Sindicatos que tiene la obligación, en nombre nuestro, que para algo estamos integrados ahí dentro, de presionar a la Comisión Europea en favor de los intereses de los trabajadores y las trabajadoras de toda Europa. Es una vergüenza lo que está pasando en algunos países del este de Europa. Nosotros siempre estamos en acciones de solidaridad con nuestras compañeras y nuestros compañeros del este de Europa, porque precisamente el hecho de no tener un convenio colectivo o de no tener derecho a la negociación colectiva es algo absolutamente primordial y absolutamente fundamental. Estamos en pleno debate al mismo tiempo con nuestros compañeros de la Confederación Europea de Sindicatos en la Comisión Europea, precisamente en un momento en que estamos intentando tirar para adelante una directiva digna sobre salarios mínimos europeos, en la que ya hay bastante polémica por aquello de si es importante que haya una ley en cada país o si es más importante que el sistema de negociación colectiva prevalezca, etcétera, etcétera. Es importante que haya garantías para todos los sistemas de negociación colectiva europeos, por diferentes que sean, y garantizar sobre todo que los que tienen menos derecho tengan derecho como mínimo a una ley básica. En estos momentos estamos, vuelvo a decir, con nuestra Confederación Europea de Sindicatos presionando a la Comisión Europea para que esta directiva salga adelante. Yo creo que en los próximos meses probablemente tendremos novedades al respecto, y solo para no largarme mucho más y pediros perdón porque dentro de unos minutos tengo que conectarme a otro asunto, agradecer la iniciativa que estáis llevando a cabo y que estamos a vuestra entera disposición para lo que necesitéis. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Carlos. And I know you have to leave, but before you do, can you perhaps tell us, and speaking maybe a little bit slower than you just did due to the translation, can you tell us one thing that the rest of Europe can learn from Spain?
Ok, gracias. Bueno, se hace difícil responder qué pueden aprender los demás de España. Yo creo que lo que debemos intentar, llevar hacia adelante en la medida de lo posible es intentar tener un poco la mentalidad de trabajar en red. intentar que mis sistemas no prevalezcan por encima de los demás, sino tener un poco la mentalidad europea de que por mucho que haya países que tienen una situación mucho mejor, puedan ser solidarios con el resto de Europa y de alguna manera quizá desde España trasladar esto, ¿no? Nuestro sistema de negociación colectiva es muy garantista, pero lo que ocurre muchas veces en España es que las garantías legales que tenemos en la negociación colectiva, muchas empresas no las cumplen. España es un país donde están instaladas todas las multinacionales más importantes del mundo, pero el sistema económico se basa en un 90% de pequeñas y medianas empresas. Y muchas veces es en la pequeña y mediana empresa, que a veces es empresa familiar también, estamos hablando de pequeñísimas empresas, es ahí donde las garantías mínimas de un convenio colectivo no se están cumpliendo. Yo estoy seguro que en otros países está ocurriendo exactamente lo mismo. Y gran parte de nuestra labor como sindicatos es estar intentando representar a la mayor parte de estos trabajadores para que esas condiciones se cumplan. Estamos muy acostumbrados a intentar llevar adelante un trabajo en red con las organizaciones empresariales más representativas para que ellos también presionen a su vez. Y a lo mejor este trabajo en red, bueno, es algo que sí podemos trasladar al resto de Europa. Pero bueno, lo estamos haciendo en las federaciones internacionales, en la Confederación Europea. Desde luego nosotros seguimos aprendiendo de los demás, pero es un poco aportar nuestra experiencia lo máximo posible. Eso es lo mínimo que puedo decir en estos momentos.
Thank you very much, Carlos, and thank you for joining us today, both in the breakout rooms and just here in this panel. I would like to move to our last speaker, who is Laurens Harteveld, and he is policy advisor at the Dutch Employers Association, AVVN. Laurens, please go ahead.
Thank you. The question is, why are collective bargaining agreements so different across Europe? Well, I think the answer is that collective bargaining agreement is a reaction to the societal developments. And since we have different countries and different societies, then also there will be a lot of differences between collective bargaining agreements. But it's a pity that we don't know these differences yet. But because I just was in the breakout session and I learned a lot about collective labor agreements in other countries. So it's very interesting to have access to all collective labor agreements and to learn from each other. So next week I will certainly take a look at the bargaining agreements. But it's still it's a bit difficult because there is a big discussion within our organization. Should we provide all the information? Should we post the documents on the internet? Because if we do it, then we cannot give advice to our members, and we also need to pay our employees. So there is a tension in that way. But I think that if we don't do it, if we don't publish the documents about collective bargaining agreements, then other parties will do it. That's what you see already on the Dutch internet. So in order to be these organizations ahead, it's better that we publish them themselves. And what also helps is that we have a government of social affairs that publishes all the collective bargaining agreements, so the thick books. So our ministry is publishing all the documents on the internet of the big collective labor agreements, and our organization is publishing the agreements themselves, the thin documents, the changes, the outcome of bargaining. So in that way, you can have a full picture of what is happening in the Netherlands. And I would love to see the full picture of Europe in the future.
Thank you very much. I think you touch on a very interesting and a core issue here that we'd like to discuss with you. And that is, do you need this information? And I just heard you suggest yes. I would also like to invite everybody who is in the room here listening, if there's anything that you would like to add to this, is there something particular about these collective agreements that you'd like to know, please post it in the chat. And in the meantime, I will ask Isabella and Laurens to just, it's a very simple question, actually. So if we have this collective bargaining agreement and you can just look up what is in which agreement in different countries, will that help your work? And if so, then how? If I could start with Isabel.
Thank you, Jana. Yes, definitely, it will help. And actually, we didn't really wait for this work to be done. Although I'm sure it's going to be much more thorough than what we can do. Actually, as Alena pointed out, we have already a start of a database because we've been now for more than 20 years collecting information about collective bargaining developments in Europe, because this is essential when you want to try to coordinate collective bargaining throughout Europe, actually. Yes, definitely, this is very useful. And of course, wage is a key issue, working time, but also what we are doing now, we are collecting what we see the emerging topics, you know, the agreement on telework, on surveillance at work, actually, because you have mentioned, we have looked at a number of topics, but the list is increasing all the time. The only caveat I'd like to bring into that discussion, and Pauline already touched upon it, is that, of course, this is very important for the trade union. Transparency is essential for the coordination. But what we wouldn't like to have is to see that this information is actually used by government actually to monitor wage development beyond what is necessary and actually go into the direction of the government trying to send signals that wages should go down or should go up, actually. And this is one of the concerns that we have with now the proposal on a directive for minimum wage. Actually, there is this idea of monitoring, and then we would like to see some clear limits about what is the role of the government or at least the Commission in that respect, and not interfering into what we call the autonomy of the social partners.
Thank you, Isabel. And obviously, I'm a fan of looking at wages. So let me then quickly ask you, from a database on collective bargaining agreements, what information would you need on wages or pay scales in collective agreements to be able to fully contribute to this discussion and to set out policy?
We would need basic economic information like inflation, like productivity increase, because these are the basic information that unions look at. And of course, if we can have beforehand the demands that the unions have, but then of course the result, because there is also a big discrepancy. And of course you have differences in countries where you have sector agreement. It's fairly easy, I would say, but in countries where you have only company agreement, that's of course it's much more complicated to have a good overview of wage development.
Thank you. Laurens.
Well, if there is the database accessible in the near future, then I would like to see how in other countries social partners make agreements about avoiding the men-woman pay gap. What are agreements? Maybe we can learn from such agreements, and also other topics of secondary labor conditions like education. In the Netherlands, we have a lot of agreements about education, but I think progress is lagging behind. So I'm curious if there are more other ways of formulating agreements that stimulate education, professional education.
Thank you very much, Laurens. And if anybody has examples of clauses in collective agreements stimulating this education that you would like to share, please also post that in the chat already. We are running out of time, so we're slowly going to close. I just want to ask one more person. Armanda, are you here? because Isabel just mentioned something about clauses on telework. And I know that you've done something, you've done a lot of research on that for the Italian case. Can you maybe in just 1 or 2 sentences explain to us what a clause of on telework looks like? What is a clause on telework?
And now we think that Armanda is still there. Where is Armanda? If not, then I don't
Danny?
hear her yet. No.
No, she's not here.
No.
Okay, that is a real pity. Then what I can say.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, then let me just close by saying, Isabel, that in the Italian agreement, I'm not sure if you were actually in the Italian session just now, you might have been, but if not, and anybody who wasn't in the Italian session, there actually is a large section on recent developments on telework in collective bargaining agreements there. If you want to look at all 9 topics and see which countries you might have to prioritize to look for different clauses like gender equality in the French case, look at the reports as they've been posted as well. We value all feedback that you have on these reports as well. And so if there's anything that you would like to find in particular, please let us know in the chat or let us know afterwards, because we'd like to make sure that you can access the kind of information that you need. Thank you very much. And to all of my speakers, thank you for everybody who's here. And I'd like to pass the word back to Pauline.